fantasy drafts within the next few weeks here. Here's a few tight ends. I have his sleeper options this week. The first guy, Jonnu Smith of the New England Patriots. So we know Jonnu Smith a few seasons ago had a big year that cashed him in the contract from the Tennessee Titans to go to New England. Last season, I know he didn't do much, and Hunter Henry's over there. 28 catches, 294 receiving yards, and a receiving touchdown. But in the deeper leagues, I could see Jonnu Smith for some reason having a back-bounce season. Mac Jones, another year under his belt now, more confidence, more grasp of the offense over there. And this offense, they're built on running the football, short intermediate routes, and guys making plays in the red zone, big targets like a Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith. So I think Henry will still be the number one guy over there at tight end in New England. But Jonnu Smith definitely could go out there and make some plays. Him and Mac Jones is second year together now. And he's a sleeper. He's going undrafted in a lot of fantasy leagues, but we know what Jonnu's capable of. And we saw with Ryan Tannehill a few seasons ago over there in Tennessee. The next guy, Gerald Everett of the Los Angeles Chargers. I'm big on Gerald Everett this season here. And he's a guy going in the last few rounds or undrafted in most fantasy leagues. So last season with the Seattle Seahawks, 63 targets, 48 catches, 478 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns with 2 fumble losses. We're now going to a Los Angeles Charger offense that's one of the best offenses in all pro football. You got Austin Eckler over there. You got Justin Herbert in his third year, who could be one of the best quarterbacks already in the league when it's all said and done this season. You got Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And now you got Gerald Everett, who's a good red zone target and an athletic tight end that could get open in the middle of the field and make plays with linebackers on him or in zone coverage. So right now, going late in drafts or undrafted, like I mentioned, I'd be very confident, to be honest with you, to plug him in my tight end position and just roll with it because he can make plays. He's got a good quarterback, and defense is not going to pay attention to Everett. He's the third or fourth option at best on this offense here, and I just think he's going to go under the radar, and he's definitely a tight end that could have a big season for fantasy owners and definitely help out this Los Angeles Charger team try to take the next step and go deep into the playoffs, hopefully for their sake. The next guy's Hayden Hurst of the Cincinnati Bengals. So most leagues, he's not getting drafted as well as Hayden Hurst. And we saw many seasons ago with the Baltimore Ravens and even his first season with the Atlanta Falcons, he was pretty good as Hayden Hurst. But now with the Cincinnati Bengals, who lost C.J. Uzomah to the New York Jets in free agency. Last year for Hurst, 26 catches, 221 receiving yards, and 3 touchdowns with a fumble loss. But right now, I think he's the number one guy over there in Cincinnati in tight end. And just like the Gerald Everett situation, defenses, they're not really going to play great coverage or soft coverage they're going to play on Hurst with all the great weapons over there in Cincinnati with Joe Mixon, Jamar Chase, who was an absolute animal in his rookie year last year, T. Higgins, who's a great receiver, and Tyler Boyd, who's a very solid possession receiver as their third receiver. So Hayden Hurst, he could be a sneaky guy this year, 500-600 yards, and it wouldn't surprise me for 7 or 8 touchdowns this year or be a hot pickup as the season goes on. So a lot of people forgot Hayden Hurst, but we know he definitely could go out there and make plays and be a decent tight end. And he's a sleeper option for sure, going undrafted in most fantasy leagues, where he definitely can help fantasy owners down the line this season. Next guy's Irv Smith Jr. of the Minnesota Vikings. So Irv Smith Jr., if you've been a fan of the channel or watching it over the last few years, I've been talking about Irv Smith a lot, but injuries or just behind on the depth chart have been the problem. Last season, he missed the whole season, but right now, he's back as Irv Smith Jr. He's the number one tight end over there in Minnesota. Kyle Rudolph was ahead of him a few years ago. Then he left in free agency. Then Tyler Conklin last season was going to be ahead of him going into the season. Then Irv Smith went down with the injury as well, and he's gone as well going to the New York Jets. So Irv Smith, very athletic tight end. This guy, he could play receiver if he really wanted to. That's how good he is. And he's going to be big in this offense. I know Justin Jefferson's the headliner and one of the best receivers already in the league going into his third season. You got Adam Thielen, who's a very solid receiver and possession guy. And then you got the monster in the backfield, Dalvin Cook. So Kirk Cousins, once again this season, has great weapons. And Irv Smith Jr., a guy going 13th, 14th round of fantasy drafts, or a guy going undrafted as well, where I think he could be a breakout and a sleeper tight end at the same time this season and put up big numbers. So honestly, I would be confident in drafting Irv Smith Jr. late in your fantasy draft and starting him at tight end if you want to load up at other positions or just taking a lottery ticket on him as your backup tight end. But honestly, I don't like drafting 2 tight ends for my fantasy leagues. If you want to roll with Irv Smith as the starter, I think he could be decent. We saw Tyler Conklin most of the season have fantasy value and have a good game every other game. And Irv Smith could do the same thing, but he's more of an athlete and a better route runner than Tyler Conklin. So Irv Smith is definitely a tight end that I think is a sleeper option this year. And the final tight end I think is a sleeper and could be decent this year is AlieCox of the Indianapolis Colts. So AlieCox, he's been on this Colt team over the last few years with the carousel of quarterbacks that had Jacoby Brissett, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz last season, now Matt Ryan here. We know Matt Ryan, his best friend, is the tight end. We saw it for seasons with Tony Gonzalez over there in Atlanta. We saw it with Algie Crumper earlier in Matt Ryan's career. And we even saw it last season with Kyle Pitts. He had a decent rookie year. So last season from AlieCox, he was a red zone target for some days. 24 catches, 316 receiving yards, and 4 touchdowns for the 6'8" tight end. So he's a big target. They need some weapons over there on the outside and in the middle of the field besides Michael Pittman. And this could be the year where AlieCox could carve out a role as a full season tight end option. And he's a tight end going undrafted in most fantasy leagues. Honestly, I wouldn't go into the season drafting him as my starter. But if you're a player that goes for 2 tight ends in your league, to take a shot at AlieCox as a backup, I don't think is a bad idea. But in deeper leagues more than anything. So that's a few tight ends I would draft as sleeper options, and wouldn't be surprised if these guys have big seasons heading into the season and fantasy drafts within the next few weeks.